Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing 7 button-shy games that I really enjoy. We have Skulls of Sedlec, we have Food Chain Island, we have Sprawlopolis, Agropolis, Rove, Numbsters, and Circle the Wagons. Sorry, I can't really remember all of them from the back over here, but we have 7 button-shy games that I really enjoy. Some of these I've talked about before, and some of these I have not, but I will be talking about them today. And if you want to see a dose of the button-shy games that haven't worked for me, feel free to check out the video linked in the description down below for 6 button-shy games that, I mean, I enjoy them to various degrees, or some of them I did, some of them I didn't, but those 6 are not sticking around in my collection. So, 6 of one and half dozen plus 1 of another. I guess technically when you get a baker's dozen, so 6 of one and the rest of the baker's dozen on the side, or technically you can call Agropolis and Sprawlopolis basically the same game, so 6.5. Honestly, maybe I'll call the title 6.5. I don't know, we'll figure it out. But either way, let's go ahead and dive into these, starting off with those 2 over there, starting off with the 2 that are basically the same game, to the point that I'm literally going to show you one of them, not bother showing you the other them, and just tell you how it's the same game. But we have Sprawlopolis. Sprawlopolis over here, and before I dive into these, worth noting, don't take anything I say as a full rules overview or exact setup. There's going to be brief overviews of kind of how the game plays, not really diving into the modules, just trying to give you a taste of what these games are without heavily going into them. Well, without going into every little nitpick rule and all that. But Sprawlopolis is a game in which you're going to have a few cards you're trying to pick from, and you're trying to create a grid based on certain scoring goals. You see, every single card on the back has a scoring goal, and those are the things you're trying to take into account, which makes every game a unique little puzzle. From there, you're going to try to figure out, you're going to have a starting card in the grid, and then you're going to try to go ahead and take cards and place them on the board and or overlap them with other cards in ways that will ultimately try to achieve these scoring goals as best they are, while also being mindful of the fact that you want to score for the largest sections, and you're going to lose points the more disconnected roads you have in the game, which means you want to have as, connected roads as much as possible, so that you can try to balance. See if I can go ahead and grab a card here. These cards aren't going to work. There we go. I'm going to grab this card over here, and then boom, we have one less road. But you're always going to be adding more roads, you're always going to be creating more spaces, but it's how they combine with the 3 unique scoring goals that you have in play that are going to define how well you do in the game. I love Sprawlopolis. I think it's incredible. It's a game that I've played dozens and dozens of times, and it has worn a bit down on me as I've gone into it more, just because you see the same puzzles, you try the same thing, and the experience eventually, despite the large variety of scoring goals, eventually you get to a point where the game is a bit repetitive, which is where Agropolis comes into play. You see Agropolis, and they actually have Naturopolis coming out as well, but Agropolis gives you the same system with new scoring goals and new terrain, and it's more farm-based, but ultimately the gameplay is 97% the same, just with new content. The tiles don't feel significantly different. You have pastures, and that gives you a degree of small differences, but past that it comes down to the scoring that is a little different, that gives you a slightly different twist in the puzzle. This is good for mixing up your Sprawlopolis experience if you're looking for more content, but ultimately I recommend Sprawlopolis first and foremost, and then both of them if you just want more, because they're a pretty cheap game. And yes, of course, I backed Naturopolis as well, and we'll see how that one mixes up or just provides more content to an excellent travel experience. From there, we're going to go ahead and dive into Numbsters, the newest one on the list for me. You see, Numbsters is a game of numbers. It's specifically an entire game based around the joke, why is 7? Why was 9 afraid of 7? Or why was 6 afraid of 7? I don't remember the joke. Why was 6 afraid of 7? And the answer is because 7, 8, 9. That's the joke. That's why you're afraid of 7, because 7, 8, 9. To that end, you're going to mix up a few starting cards plus the 8 into this deck. You're going to mix them up, and you're going to have a starting hand, and then you're going to go ahead and look at your hand, and you're going to see what you have over here. I think I have too many cards. We should have a few less cards in our starting hand. Let's take one of these cards out. This one's stuck to another card. That's not a good start over here. No, one of the cards is sticky. We'll have to deal with that. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and have our cards over here. And you have your hand of cards. You're going to go ahead and draw a card from the top of the deck and add it to your hand. From there, you have to ensure that something eats something else. Specifically, you have to have 2 numbers that are adjacent, and then the lower number will eat the larger number. So right now, it happened to work out great. I can go ahead and have the 17 eat the 18. But you can always use the number rule on the top card instead, where a double-digit Numbster eats a single-digit Numbster, and every turn you get 1 move or swap. So for example, if I don't want to eat the 17 or the 18, I could potentially move the 1 to over here and then have the double-digit number eat the 1. I could do that because that's the revised eating rule. In this case, I actually want to go ahead and eat the 18, so I'll eat the 18, and since the 8 is not at the top of the deck, I'm still in play, we're still going. So to that end, we'll go ahead and use this. Now this number is the odd Numbster eats a bigger odd Numbster, so I could have the 1 eat the 17. I'm actually going to do that because I like getting rid of some of the extreme cards. It makes the end game a little easier. You're going to continue this process, adding cards to your hand, then potentially making a move around. So for example, example, over here, nothing's really set up great. I could move the 14 to the 13, but there's no way I can really configure things so that there's a 10 or a 1 adjacent. Single digit number eats an odd Numbster, so I'm going to go ahead and move this 13 to over here, and then have the 1, the single digit number, eat the odd Numbster, and then have the 13 go away. You're going to continue that process until eventually you get down to the last few cards, and that's basically going to be the game. Excuse me while I scrape whatever is on this card off this card. That's unnecessary. But anyways, that's basically the game. That's Numbsters. It's a solo puzzle as you work your way through a hand of cards, trying to have each number eat each other until you're down to only 2 cards in your hand, one of which is the 8, and the other of which is the last number. Then there's a fun little thing on the back of the rulebook where you can try to win with every card being the last number, which is very cute, very clever concept over there. I'm going to have to do that at some point. I've already won this game 3 times, and I don't remember which numbers I won it with, so that's not going to be relevant. But that's Numbsters. I like this puzzle. First of all, it plays in your hand. This is a perfect airplane game. This is going to be going with me on like the next 5 airplane trips I go on until I get bored. Like, contrary to Sprawlopolis, which as you play it actually requires table space, you still might be able to do it on an airplane tray table. This one is like basically played in your hand plus a deck. You need a drop of space, but you can make it work. You can play it on literally your lap and get this game taken care of. It's a great little puzzle. I really enjoy it. It's very creative, adorable artwork. This is one that lacks the depth that Sprawlopolis will give you, but is very enjoyable, an easy game to dive into. And for context, by the way, Sprawlopolis and Agropolis for me, these are 4.5s out of 5s for me. I really enjoy these games. They are excellent games. They give you a solid puzzle. Numbsters to me is a 4 to 5. The gameplay alone is light, but what it does in this small package and how it does it and the combined portable cost, all those factors, and the enjoyable experience, it's a 4 to 5 solo experience. By the way, some of these games do have solo or 2-player modes, all these things. I'm heavily focused in the way they're kind of meant to be played. So for example, Sprawlopolis is kind of meant to be played as a solo game, even though there is a 2-player mode. Speaking of 2-player modes, let's go ahead and dive into Circle the Wagons, which is a 2-player game, and this one has a solo mode, but I won't be talking about that quite as well. Also, my poor wallet. This thing is falling apart. This wallet, more than the rest, I need a replacement wallet for this game. But the basic idea of the game, before we get into expansions, you're going to start the game by creating a little bit of a tableau around the board as a little circle of areas. Now, I'm only taking out some of the cards here. Again, see my notes about how I'm not doing full setup and all those things, but you're going to have, similar to Sprawlopolis, you're going to have a set of configuration of cards that give you the scoring rules for the game. From there, players are going to draft cards to put into their own tableau, so I can take this card, but if I take this card, then my opponent gets to take that card, meaning the further along I go, the more your opponent can take all the cards you skip. So you can always choose exactly what you want in this game, and unfortunately, that means your opponent gets stuff. This is a 2-player game. Your opponent will get the stuff you skip over, so you need to think about what you do and don't value in this game, and what your opponent does and doesn't value in the game. From there, you're going to take the card, you're going to add it to your own tableau, and then you're going to go ahead and the player takes their card, you take, maybe you skip this card, they get that, and you put this over here, and you can overlay it or put it adjacently as needed to try to ultimately complete the scoring goals. So it is a very similar scoring goal, and there's a few ways as far as default scoring, plus the scoring goals, things like that in the game. So it's a very similar concept to Sprawlopolis in the sense that you have a whole deck of cards, each that has a scoring goal on the back, and then the tiles themselves on the front, and then ultimately it's about how you combine those in the game, but it's a very different system as far as how you actually get your hands on the cards because of the nature of the fact that you're drafting these cards from a pool, and you're trying to get your hands on them. I really enjoy this one. To me, I think Sprawlopolis initially started off higher for me, but this one, because it's 2-player head-to-head and there's that direct competition, has held up longer for me. It's another 4.5 out of 5, a really enjoyable, simple experience that I really need to get a new wallet. The problem with sleeving Button Shy games is that the wallets tend to break once you start sleeving them. Let's go there for the Food Chain Island, possibly my least favorite from these, and one that, like, Numbsters almost replaces it, but not entirely, and again, not a full rules overview over here, just we're going to go into what we can. Are some of these cards sleeved and some not? No, nothing's sleeved over here. But Food Chain Island is going to have you creating a board over here, a board of 16 cards, and again, not heavily rules or everything. We're going to go over creating a board of 16 cards, and the same idea over here, where a number can eat numbers that are lower than it by a certain amount. So for example, this fox over here, this lynx over here, can eat a 9, 8, or 7. The fox can eat an 8, 7, or 6. So up to 3 below it is what you can eat as you create your own little tableau. And again, not all the cards because the other cards are in there. And plus you'll have some abilities that will help you, some abilities that will hurt you in the game. Some cards you have to use, and some cards that you will want to use to help you. But then past that, it's about kind of just eating adjacent cards, being mindful of the fact that there's also abilities at play on the cards. So similar to Numbsters, you have a sequence where you're trying to eat numbers and end up, this is a solo game. Your goal is to end up in a well, it's a solo game that's unrelated to the goal, but your goal is to end up with a single card left ideally, although there is a scoring metric, you know, 1 or 2 cards is good or whatnot. There's a scoring metric of how well you do, but ultimately you and I both know that you won't be satisfied until you manage to get down to a single card left in the grid. But from there you go ahead and take the, you go ahead and eat the animal, and then take the ability of the card, which gives you a combination of different cards you can go ahead and do. So for example, when you use the snake to eat the bat over here, you have to swap the location of 2 cards. So you have a lot of flexibility over how different abilities will help you move around and condense the grid, and the random setup of the grid, combined with the fact that there's powers and abilities, combined with the fact that there's extra numbers, means you always have a little bit of a puzzle as far as eating other cards, similar to Numbsters, but doing so in a grid, in a 4x4 grid generally, although again you can add cards and modify that sizing, but it gives you a very solid, compelling puzzle of powers and abilities you want to be mindful of as you use some cards to eat other cards. Again, very similar to Numbsters. Numbsters I think is a drop simpler and gets held in your hand, but I think this one probably has more replayability in its current form just because of how much expansion content there is to it, which ultimately for me is why it's staying. To me, Food Chain Island is also a 4 out of 5. I've really enjoyed this experience. Again, another solid solo experience from Button Shy that gives me a very compelling challenge to go through as I try to think through how to combine the cards. Every different setup is going to give you a different puzzle, and trying to think how to make everything work so you can finally get down to a single card and win. And then because there's cards that you sometimes have to use as a deficit that will get in the way, or cards you can use as an aid to in some way help you, there's going to be 2 different classes of cards you can add on the side, that gives you difficulty scaling as well. If you're having too much trouble with the game, you can add a few more of those blue cards that will help you. Alternatively, if you're having too much issues, you can add some of the white cards that will get in your way. I really enjoy Food Chain Island. From there, let's talk about Rove. Rove is one that I don't know exactly where Rove's going to end up for me. I really enjoy what it does, but overall, I find that this one has so much thought process behind trying to make everything work that at times it feels a drop like homework. Now, if you watch my other video, you'll know that I said that in terms of Ugly Griffin Inn, that's a game system that the more I played it, the more it felt like homework, and Rove has that borderline feel to it. I really like it, but it's really thinking for the experience it provides. The general idea is you have a sequence of cards you're going through, and you can overlay them as you go through a certain journey and create a little like picture or whatnot, but basically you're trying to create this setup over here, and you're going to have your, where are your cards over here? I need to grab all the cards from here. You're going to have your cards over here, your actual modules that will go into the grid, and you're trying to figure out how to arrange your modules to match the setup in question. So you have these modules over here, you put them into the grid, and you're trying to figure out how to match the setup of this grid in terms of where things will have to go. So this will have to go up here, you have to have things next to it below, and like that, and then like this, and like that, and that would be the grid module in terms of matching that specific picture of what it wants where in the correlation on the grid. That's the general idea. You're trying to move these around. Each of them have abilities as far as how they move, what directions they move, how far they move, whether they skip over things, whether they push things, but then you're using the card signal. You're going to have a hand of cards that are going to give you the number of movement points you have, but additionally, if you set up certain configurations on those cards, then you can go ahead and cash them for the higher movement point value. So you're being mindful of these little mini goals based on the economy of the cards you have. You're being mindful of the actual main goals you're trying to achieve because you have to achieve a sequence of them in order to ultimately win the game, and that's the core idea of Rove. It's all about creating these little pattern sequences. It's in a very challenging, very compelling puzzle that is very fun to go through and has a lot of replayability in terms of just the sheer combination of variety of setups, and the fact that you have to go through a sequence of setups means there's an order to it as far as how you have to approach it, and all of that just results in an excellent and incredibly compelling, rewarding experience that also is such a drain mentally on you as you play through it that is the only downside I have on it. I still have this one as a tentative 4 out of 5. It's the kind of one that at times I wonder exactly where it should be. I don't find myself pulling this one out quite as much as the other ones in their line, but it's one that is it has too much game for too small a package, and there's like, I think I have a full other package of like more Rove content and another Rove wallet as far as other games that were going in here, that it's just too much content and too good a game that I really enjoy Rove, and I do highly recommend this one. And then lastly, my absolute favorite, my only 5 out of 5 over here, Skulls of Sedlec. I adore this game. Again, I have wallets of Skulls of Sedlec. I have wallets and more. I think I have some duplicate content. I need to figure out exactly what's duplicate and then, you know, gift that to somebody or whatnot. But Skulls of Sedlec is a game about trying to dig up dead bodies and rearrange them in your own mausoleum as you want. That's kind of the theme, but that's a little dark, but let's ignore the darkness of it. But basically you're going to have different sets of graveyards on the board that you're trying to dig up. Again, ignore my not full setup over here. On your turn, you either go ahead, well, it's the first thing you do on your turn. First turn is you turn over any 2 piles, any 2, whatever you want, and then take one of those cards into your hand. The next turn, and this is a 2-player game, you're going back and forth, creating your own grid. The other player can go ahead and take the card left, or they can turn up 2 piles themselves and pick one. So maybe they go ahead and take this into their hand. Now I can turn over 2 new 2 piles, or I can take a card, or I can start my pyramid by playing this card. I'm going to go ahead and grab this card, and then my opponent's going to go ahead and, take this card or whatnot. And now, because I have 2 cards, I must play a card. You have a hand limit of 2 in the game, which means once you take in too many cards, you have to start playing cards, and you're creating a pyramid that is 4 by 3 by 2. Not by 1, 4 by 3 by 2. No 1 at the top. And so as you create that pyramid, you're trying to create pyramids that are going to have different structures of how things score, which is where we're going to go ahead and grab some of these cards over here and just see what we can kind of arrange as a pyramid over here. So if we're doing something along these lines over here, and we actually have the Executioners module already baked in, which is fun because I love the Executioners. We're going to place this over here and that over there because that would probably score better. And then we'll go ahead and toss this over here up here, and then put these 2 here and this one here and call that a day as far as how the end pyramid is constructed. Everything scores differently in this game. Peasants are worth a point. Priests are worth 2 points, but only once per line, which means I'll get 2 points for this one, 2 points for that one, but this one won't score because I already scored this line. Executioners are worth a point for themselves, plus a point for every connected prisoner, which means this is worth 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and this one won't score for these over here. Additionally, prisoners are worth 2 points, but only if they're touching a priest. So this will score, these 2 will score, this will score, but this one is not touching a priest, so it won't score. Lovers are worth 3 points each, but only if paired together. And then the royalties over here. Royalty is worth a point for every king or peasant below it. Every royalty or peasant below it. So this royalty is worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This royalty is worth 1, 2, 3. And this royalty is worth nothing in the game. You're going to draft cards trying to build the best scoring combination pyramid. And there's a ton of modules of ways you can mix things in order to give you a more varied, more infinite experience as far as how this game actually plays. But I adore it. I find Skulls of Sedlec gives you such a ridiculously rewarding experience that teaches in a few minutes, plays in a few minutes, and it's just incredibly fun to build out a high scoring pyramid, and it just doesn't get old. Any degree of getting old it would have has gone out the window as I've continued to dive into more and more expansions, mixing the modules in different ways to just give me more ways to build out my scoring pyramid, and it's just satisfying, short, plays quick, teaches quick, a great 2-player game that does have a solo mode that I still have not played. And that's what we have over here. We have Skulls of Sedlec. We have my 5 out of 5 over here. We have Rove over here, an excellent game that is a little brain burnery at times. We have Food Chain Island, a game that continues to be enjoyable and rewarding, although Numbsters I like more, but Food Chain Island has more depth to it. We have Circle the Wagons, a 2-player drafting game that I absolutely adore. We have Agropolis over here, which is basically an inferior Sprawlopolis, but it's good for variety of experience. We have Sprawlopolis, the first button shy game I fell in love with, and one that gives you an incredibly compelling solo challenge. And then lastly, we have Numbsters, the most recent addition to my collection, and just a fun, enjoyable hand management game of trying to have one number eat the next. And that's basically it. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to check out the other video of 6 button shy games that weren't for me. And until next time, I hope you have a good one.